It is election night 2024 and the scene is set for a great and interesting election. If Mike Pence wins today, he will be the first person in modern American history to be a vice president to a one-term president and eventually become the president of the United States. Now, if Pete Buttigieg wins today, he will be the first gay president of the United States. Now, if we take a look at our 2024 election forecast, you can see a clear advantage for Pete Buttigieg, with him right now at 245 electoral votes and Mike Pence at 131. Right now, we have 9 states in the toss-up column: Texas, Arizona, Alaska, Wisconsin, Ohio, Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. It is 7 p.m. on the East Coast, and we have our first poll closing, and we can make a couple projections. We can now project that Mike Pence will win the state of Kentucky. That is 8 electoral votes to Mike Pence. And the state of Vermont will go to Pete Buttigieg. So now we have 4 states in the too close to call column. So let's get a key race alert right now. The state of Georgia is too close to call. This is a must win for Mike Pence. Pete Buttigieg would love to win it as well. It would be very helpful, but Mike Pence needs this a bit more than Pete Buttigieg. Right now, Mike Pence has a 17% lead. We have 60% of the vote in, but we haven't counted the all the vote in the Atlanta area. We just started, so I'm sure that's going to get closer anytime soon. In the state of Indiana, both of these people, it's their home state. It is too close to call. Right now, there's a 49 to 49% tie. Pete Buttigieg isn't expected to be this close in Indiana at the time we're speaking right now, but he's putting up a good fight in Indiana so far. In South Carolina, 44% of the vote is in. Mike Pence has a 22% lead. I'm sure we're expecting that to tighten a bit, but Mike Pence is expected to carry that state today. And in the state of Virginia, Mike Pence has an early lead. Virginia always does this every election. The Republican takes an early lead and the Democrat catches up. Sometimes the Democrat overtakes the Republican. We're expecting Pete Buttigieg to overtake Mike Pence eventually, but anything could happen. So now if we take a look at our electoral map, we have Mike Pence at 8 electoral votes and Pete Buttigieg at 3 electoral votes. Now it is time for our 7:30 poll closings. We can now project the state of West Virginia will go to Mike Pence. Now let's get a key race alert right now. The state of North Carolina, 16 electoral votes, a big prize for both campaigns. Mike Pence has 46% of the vote right now. Pete Buttigieg has 50% of the vote. We have 44% of the vote in North Carolina. In Ohio, Mike Pence would love to win the state. Pete Buttigieg would love it as well. Mike Pence needs it a bit more. 53 to 44. Pete Buttigieg has an early lead. We have 65% of the vote in Ohio. If we now look at our map, Mike Pence extends his lead to 12 electoral votes. Pete Buttigieg is stuck with just 3 electoral votes in the state of Vermont. We have Georgia, Indiana, North Carolina, Ohio, South Carolina, and Virginia. They are too close to call. Let's get a key race alert in Virginia and Indiana. The state of Virginia is still too close to call. Mike Pence has 44% of the vote and Pete Buttigieg has 53% of the vote. So as you can see, it flipped very, very quickly with 87% of the vote in. We're expecting to be able to call that vote, that state anytime soon. And the state of Indiana is still tight. We have 66% of the vote in, and it's a 1% gap. Pete Buttigieg shockingly taking the lead in Indiana. But we can now make a projection on the East Coast. We can now project that the state of Virginia will go to Pete Buttigieg, and we can also project that the state of South Carolina will go to Mike Pence. If we now have a key race alert in Georgia. Georgia is too close to call. Mike Pence's lead is shrinking. We have 75% of the vote in Georgia. Pete Buttigieg at 44% of the vote. We're expecting that to be a really tight race. This election, it is now 8 o'clock on the East Coast. We have a huge poll closing with a bunch of states on the East Coast and a few in the middle. 142 electoral votes up for grabs. We can now project the state of Connecticut will go to Pete Buttigieg. The state of Delaware will go to Pete Buttigieg. DC, where you can vote without representation, will go to Pete Buttigieg. Illinois, 19 electoral votes will go to Pete Buttigieg. Maryland will go to Pete Buttigieg. Massachusetts will go to Pete Buttigieg. New Jersey will go to Pete Buttigieg. That's 14 electoral votes. And the state of Rhode Island will go to Pete Buttigieg. We can project that Mike Pence will take the state of Alabama, and it's not 8 electoral votes. The state of Mississippi, and it's 6 electoral votes. He will take Missouri, and it's 10 electoral votes. That's called relatively early, but we can project that Mike Pence will take the state of Missouri. Oklahoma, 7 electoral votes, and Tennessee, 11 electoral votes. Now we have a few key race alerts. The state of Florida, this is a huge state. They've already got 84% of the vote in, and Mike Pence and Pete Buttigieg are both tied in the state of Florida. That's a huge prize of 31 electoral votes. The state of New Hampshire, too close to call, 56 to 41. Pete Buttigieg has a lead at the start. We're expecting to be able to call that very soon. It looks like Pete Buttigieg is going to take that state eventually. The state of Pennsylvania, a key swing state, 75% of the vote in Pennsylvania, and Mike Pence has a 3% lead in Pennsylvania. If we now take a look at our map, Pete Buttigieg takes the lead with 86 electoral votes. Mike Pence is stuck on 63. Florida, Georgia, Indiana, Maine, North Carolina, New Hampshire, Ohio, and Pennsylvania are still too close to call. Let's get a key race alert in one of those states. Indiana, 11 electoral votes. We have 71% of the vote in, and Pete Buttigieg extends his lead in Indiana. This is a shocker right now. No one's expecting Indiana to be this close, but for now, Pete Buttigieg has the lead in his home state. The state of Ohio, 17 electoral votes. Pete Buttigieg is still keeping his lead with 77%. It shrunk a bit, but this is relatively a huge lead for this time in Ohio. We can now project that Mike Pence will take the state of Arkansas, 6 electoral votes, and we can project that the state of Maine, 3 out of the 4 electoral votes will go to Pete Buttigieg. The state and Maine 2nd district will go to Mike Pence. All 1 electoral vote will go to Mike Pence. New Hampshire will go to Pete Buttigieg. Let's get a key race alert in the state of Florida. 93% of the vote is in. Mike Pence has the lead in Florida. 3% lead in Florida. We're expecting to be able to call that state anytime soon. If we're now taking a look at our electoral map, Pete Buttigieg has 93 electoral votes to Mike Pence's 71. Florida, Georgia, Indiana, North Carolina, Ohio, and Pennsylvania are still too close to call. Let's get a key race alert in one of those states. Georgia. The race is tightening in Georgia a lot. Now it's a 6% gap. We have 82% of the vote in. It's still too close to call in Georgia. In North Carolina, we have 80% of the vote in. It is now a tie. This is a key state for both campaigns. Let's take a look at this. 9 o'clock poll closing. 157 electoral votes are up for grabs. The state of Kansas will go to Mike Pence, 6 electoral votes. The state of Louisiana will also go to Mike Pence, that's 8. Nebraska, he will take 4 out of the 5 electoral votes in Nebraska. North Dakota and South Dakota will both go to Mike Pence. The state of Wyoming, that's 3 electoral votes to Mike Pence. Pete Buttigieg will carry the state of Colorado, and it's 10 electoral votes. Minnesota, 9 electoral votes. That's called relatively quickly. Normally you would put it in the too close to call column first, and he will take Nebraska's 2nd district. That's also called relatively early. The state of New Mexico, 5 electoral votes, and the state of New York, that's 27 electoral votes. Let's get a few key race alerts right now. The state of Arizona is too close to call, another key state for both campaigns. 71% of the vote is in. Pete Buttigieg has a 5% lead in Arizona. In Michigan, that's 15 electoral votes. Pete Buttigieg has a huge lead of 17%, but we're expecting that to tighten anytime soon. The state of Wisconsin, Pete Buttigieg has a lead, 6% in Wisconsin. Mike Pence has a lead, he has a lead of 6% in Wisconsin, 52 to 46%. We have 55% of the vote in Wisconsin. The state of Texas, a huge state. Look at that, 41 electoral votes. It is too close to call. It's currently a tie in Texas. Things are looking really close. We're expecting to find a winner in Texas in a few hours. We can now look at our electoral map. Pete Buttigieg has 145 electoral votes to Mike Pence's 97. Now let's have a key race so that in the state of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is still too close to call. We have 88% of the vote in. Mike Pence is catching up, I think, to Pete Buttigieg. It's 53 to 45. Pete Buttigieg has a lead of 8% in Pennsylvania. It looks like he's going to take the 19 electoral votes, but we have two major projections. Mike Pence will take the state of Florida, and it's 31 electoral votes. This is a huge win for Mike Pence. People just thought he had a chance in Florida, but we can project that Mike Pence will take all 31 electoral votes in Florida. The state of Pennsylvania, we were just talking about that recently. It will go to Pete Buttigieg. He will take the 19 electoral votes in Pennsylvania. So now let's get a few key race alerts in other states which are too close to call. Indiana is still too close to call. It's back in the tie column. It's a tie in Indiana right now, 49 to 49. We have 88% of the vote in Indiana. Indiana hasn't been this close since 2008 in Barack Obama versus John McCain, but right now it is too close to call in Indiana. In Ohio, Pete Buttigieg's lead is shrinking in Ohio. It's a 4% lead with 93% of the vote in Ohio. This is looking as a much tighter race that many expected Mike Pence to take this state easily. Donald Trump tweeted that Mike Pence will take the state of Ohio by a safe margin, but it is looking really close in Ohio right now. And it's 10 p.m. on the East Coast, and we have poll closings in 4 states. The state of Montana will go to Mike Pence. He will take all 4 electoral votes in Montana. Utah, 6 electoral votes that will go to Mike Pence. We have key race alerts in 2 of the other states. Nevada is too close to call. Last time they take for ages to count their votes. There are a ton of internet memes in Nevada about how they were slow with their votes, but this time they're counting pretty quickly. We already have 84% of the vote in, a 13% lead for Pete Buttigieg in Nevada. In Iowa, 79% of the vote is in, and it is too close to call. Mike Pence is a 4% lead in Iowa. Now we have a key huge projection in Michigan. We can now project that Pete Buttigieg will take the state of Michigan, and it's 15 electoral votes. This is a huge win for Pete Buttigieg. He needed to win the state, and he has done just that. If we now take a look at the electoral map, 179 electoral votes for Pete Buttigieg, 138 for Mike Pence. We still have a bunch of states which are still too close to call. Speaking of those too close to call states, let's have a key race alert in a few of them. Arizona is still too close to call. Pete Buttigieg has a 3% lead with 88% of the vote in Arizona. This is a key swing state. Both parties would want to take the state of Arizona. Georgia, another key swing state, still too close to call. Pete Buttigieg is catching up in Georgia right now. Mike Pence's lead has shrunk to only 2% in Georgia. Indiana, both of their home states right now, Mike Pence takes a slight lead. It is still too close to call. A tight race in that Midwestern state. Mike Pence has the lead. North Carolina, 16 electoral votes. We have 92% of the vote in. Mike Pence takes a slight lead in North Carolina. In Ohio, Pete Buttigieg lead has shrunken in Ohio to now it's only a 2% lead. We have 98% of the vote in, so expecting to get a call in Ohio anytime soon. Texas, that's 41 electoral votes. We have 88% of the vote in Texas. Mike Pence has a 3% lead in the big great state. In Wisconsin, Pete Buttigieg has taken the lead in Wisconsin, a 1% lead with 86% of the vote in. Let's stand by for 2 more projections before we have a few key race alerts and we call the West Coast states. The state of Nevada will go to Pete Buttigieg and its 6 electoral votes. This was very expected. Mike Pence thought he had a chance in Nevada and will go to Pete Buttigieg. It has been a blue state now since 2008. The state of Indiana, Mike Pence will carry his home state. This was a really huge, tightly contested race. Both parties were having leads, going behind, coming back up. It was a great, exciting race in Indiana, but we can predict that Mike Pence, the former governor of Indiana, will take that state. We have a key race alert in Indiana, just to show you how tight the race was. Look at Indiana, 1% gap in Indiana. We have 99% of the vote in reporting, so you can make this projection. Now it is time for our West Coast poll closings. The state of California, nothing unexpected there. 55 electoral votes will go to Pete Buttigieg. The state of Hawaii, 4 electoral votes will go to Pete Buttigieg. Oregon, 8 electoral votes will go to Pete Buttigieg. And Washington, 12 electoral votes will go to Pete Buttigieg. We have a call for Mike Pence as well in this poll closing. The state of Idaho will go to Mike Pence. That's 4 electoral votes for Mike Pence. If you look at the electoral map now, 264 electoral votes to Pete Buttigieg, 153 to Mike Pence. And we have Arizona, Georgia, Iowa, North Carolina, Ohio, Texas, and Wisconsin. They're the states that are too close to call. If Mike Pence can get a win in any of those states, he will become the president of the United States. Let's get a key race alert in one of those states. The state of Texas is still too close to call. Pete Buttigieg catches up a bit in Texas with 94% of the vote in. Mike Pence still keeps a lead in Texas. It is still too close to call, but I'm just getting news, and this is breaking news. This is a huge projection, so stand back and stand by. Pete Buttigieg will be elected the 47th president of the United States, and this is a record-breaking victory. Pete Buttigieg, the man, the mayor from Indiana, Mayor Pete, they like to call him. He will be the president of the United States. He will be the first gay president of the United States. We can make this call because we can project that he will take the state of Ohio. Many expected Ohio to go to Mike Pence, but Pete Buttigieg will carry the state of Ohio. If we look at the state, he won it by 1% in Ohio, a tight race. We can now project that Pete Buttigieg will be elected president of the United States. He will be 47th president, and in January 20th, 2025, he will be inaugurated into the presidency. If you can now take a look at our electoral map, we have the crown next to Pete Buttigieg because he is President-elect Pete Buttigieg. Now, 281 electoral votes he has to Mike Pence's 153. Arizona, Georgia, Iowa, North Carolina, Texas, and Wisconsin are still too close to call, so the election isn't over yet, so let's have a few key race alerts. Alaska is too close to call. They're counting the votes much faster than last time. Mike Pence has a 10% lead in the state of Alaska. Iowa is a tie right now. You have 96% of the vote in Iowa. Both parties look like they can still take it, but we didn't expect Mike Pence to get this close in Iowa. It just shows you that polls aren't always correct. The state of North Carolina, Pete Buttigieg takes the slight lead in North Carolina, and we have 98% of the vote in North Carolina, but we have a few projections to make right now. The state of Arizona will go to Pete Buttigieg. He will take its 12 electoral votes. And the state of Georgia, 16 electoral votes. The Democrats will hold onto the state of Georgia. That's now the second time in 28 years or something like that, 32 years maybe, the Democrats have taken the state of Georgia. The state of North Carolina will also go to Pete Buttigieg. It hasn't been blue since 2008 with Barack Obama, but it is now back to being blue. That's 16 electoral votes for Pete Buttigieg. And the state of Wisconsin will go to Pete Buttigieg. That's 10 electoral votes. We can make a projection in Alaska that Mike Pence will take the state of Alaska. So if we now look at our electoral map, Pete Buttigieg extends his lead even more to 335 electoral votes. Mike Pence is stuck on 156. If Mike Pence can take the state of Texas, this would be by definition a landslide victory. Some would already call this a landslide, but to be a definite landslide, you need more than 350 electoral votes, and Pete Buttigieg looks like he can do that if he can win the state of Texas. And also Iowa is still up for grabs. Let's get a key race alert in both of those states. Iowa is still too close to call. We have 98% of the vote in. 49 to 48. Iowa is still too close to call. In the state of Texas, it's still 50 to 48. We have 97% of the vote in Texas, a huge 41 electoral votes. But we just getting breaking news. We have updated numbers in both the states, and I think it's enough for us to make some calls. The state of Iowa will go to Pete Buttigieg. This is a huge flip and a huge statement that Pete Buttigieg can do well in the North, and the Democrats can do well in the North. And the North has not become fully Republican yet. The North was trending red, but Pete Buttigieg will take the state of Iowa, and the state of Texas will remain in the Republican column for 4 more years as Mike Pence take all 41 electoral votes in the state of Texas. So now we have a full electoral map. It's 341 to 197. Pete Buttigieg has a huge victory. Some would call this a landslide, but it's not by definition. If we now take a look at the margins in some of these states, this is a pretty close election. If we look, many states on the tilt margin, a few leans. Pete Buttigieg did well up north, having the state of Michigan and Pennsylvania being the likely column, and Minnesota in the safe column is not a normal sight. It's been a likely Democratic / tilt Democratic state for tons of years, but we can now put it back in the safe Democratic column. This is the end of election night 2024, and I'll see you in 2026 for the 2026 midterms.